economic win-win situations.
What is the current situation of Britain's aid to India? Because I remember watching Nigel Farage saying that Britain should not be doing any further aid to India, and also Shashi Tharoor was talking about this. Yeah, so I know it's not routed through the government of India. You're doing it on a different level to different people most in need. But I'd like to know what's the current situation on that. Yeah.
You talked about sort of the southernisation of aid and stuff like that, but some of the sorts of projects that you were talking about sounded like a lot of things that traditional donors had sort of done and often been more criticised for, especially in terms of mutually beneficial aid and stuff that trade relationships that benefit the donor. Those are often some of the most heavily criticised aid programs in Western countries, as well as things like loans have been really criticised as, creating those power relationships and diplomacy, peacekeeping and diplomacy, that sort of thing, also being really heavily criticised in development theory. Do you see these programs as being substantially different when they're undertaken by India? And is that they are fundamentally different programs, or is it a completely different situation when it's being undertaken by a developing country or a country like India, just purely on the basis of the historical differences between India and those traditional donors?
UK and India aid. I'm sorry, we have to mention Nigel Farage in polite company. So it's really interesting because it's not actually an exit. So first of all, you have a toxic political situation in the UK where the Daily Mail drives a powerful political machine that is just vitriolic, alternative facts and so on. And so there is a quite right debate to be had about should countries like, say, Australia or the UK be giving aid to India. I think that's a perfectly legitimate moral question and a political question to have. But in the UK, it's surrounded by this really unpleasant kind of discourse, which forces politicians, I think, into unwise positions. But basically, in the case of India, unlike some partner countries, India's been in the driving seat. And in 2003, it told most of its donors they could leave, thank you very much. Anything they provided could go through NGOs. The UK was allowed to retain the relationship, but it was going to clearly wind down. And 2015 was the date. It became, there was that famous comment about UK aid being a peanut, which it is. But then somebody else said it is like the golden peanut. Actually, it's quite useful in some ways. Yeah. Well, so what's happened is so then it was debated wrongly as the idea of exit. It was never meant to be exit. It was agreed on both sides it would be transition. So at its height in 2014, UK aid was £300 million to India a year. Now it's about 30 million, but it's doing really different things. And this is, I think, quite problematic to label this stuff aid because it's doing economic diplomacy. So the UK is now working with India on its development partnerships. So, for example, the UK is providing assistance to India to get its lines of credit better managed. At the moment, they're quite badly exposed. It's working with India in things like smart cities and technology. And it's basically massaging the possibilities of British companies providing services to India. And it's pulled out of those big traditional projects, whatever you thought of them, are they ineffective or not, in Bihar and Orissa and working with, 100,000 small farmers. And it's really about massaging a diplomatic and economic relationship. Problematically, I think, still under the umbrella of development and still using ODA, where you can argue it's a perfectly legitimate relationship to be having, but why are we using foreign aid? Is that not, shouldn't we be doing this under trade or something else? So and this is happening universally. A lot of donors are redrawing the geography of their partnerships, but also the content, and moving away from anti-poverty, Millennium Development Goal type projects and sort of frameworks to growth projects. So development is one of the ways in which the UK is desperately hanging on to the coattails of India in our post-Brexit referendum suicidal crisis, because it's being used as a hook to stay, to try and open up into the Indian economy a bit further.